Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, October the 1st, and I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and I have the chat room open there, and I popped the link in there that I wanted to talk about tonight, and I appreciate everybody who's tuning into my shows. I've actually done almost 400 shows now, and I've got 11,400 too. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Everybody's lives and my shows are on at sort of some strange hours and whatnot, but I really appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Thank you very much. And I always say this on every show. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist or anything like that, and I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows because I wanted to be one more voice. Just one more voice speaking out against child abuse, talking about child abuse, raising awareness and education. To just be one more voice to bring this information out to people, right? So there are lots of voices out here talking, but it's just not mainstream. And so, we, like Blog Talk Radio and different places like that, you will hear people talking about child abuse, but mainstream society, is where it needs to be. And it's not. The only thing that we do see are the headlines that roll out all the time, which is horrible, which we do need to look at and we do need to pay attention to. The headlines, because that's the proof, that's the reality of child abuse, right? And they're not going away, sadly enough. More and more headlines popping up all the time of children being abused and losing their lives, at the hands of their parents and caregivers or child sexual predators or just, crazy people. And so, this is the whole issue, right? We need to talk about this. We need to find out, what's going to work, what programs are working, and then follow that example and get involved within our own communities to change this thing for these kids out here tonight, for these children, these babies, and for the future generations, right? It really should be this generation to do it, and I think we can do it. I really do. So, it's all about education, really, and getting the information out to people that this is happening, this is real. And there'll be however many kids tonight, children and babies and teenagers, losing their lives at the hands of the people that should love them and care for them and not abuse them and kill them, right? And if they don't lose their lives, they'll just end up in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, or they'll be on the street somewhere, thrown out of their home, or having to leave the home because it's too violent and their life is in danger, right? So this is so sad, and this is why I'm doing this show. I to be honest with you, I'd rather not be doing this show because I'd rather that we stop child abuse tonight, and then I could go on with my life. But sadly enough, until we do something about this, it's not going to stop. It's not going to change. And so that's why I'm doing these shows. So thank you for everybody who's tuning in. I really appreciate it. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have an adult okay it, that you can listen to my shows, because, I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we continually fight to save children's lives. That's what we do. We're all volunteers, and we are working so hard to try to raise awareness to protect children, right? So if you're a young person listening to my shows, I would ask that you would have permission, just because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And, this way you can kind of get in the habit of, letting an adult know what you're doing online. It's so important to keep yourself safe online. And all you have to do is type into your browser online safety, internet safety for children, things like this. And it will bring you tons and tons of websites with great information on there on how to keep yourself safe when you're online in the chat rooms and, on different websites and whatnot, to keep yourself safe from child sexual predators and pedophiles and people who would try to get a hold of and manipulate and then sexually abuse and assault children, right? You have to keep yourself safe. And parents, if you're listening to this, make sure you get the education, get the information, learn how to keep your family safe, right? Fear is just not going to save your life, but education might. And the more education you have, the better off your chances are that your child will not be a victim of child sexual abuse or exploitation of some type, right? So important to get that information, right? So I want to look at this website we've been looking at for a while now. It's such a great website, the Child Abuse Survivor Monument by Michael C. Irving. He's a sculptor. He's a psychotherapist, sculptor, and a survivor of child abuse himself. And he has this. He's a practicing psychotherapist, but he has a website called the Child Abuse Survivor Monument. You can find it at www.irvingstudios.com /child_abuse_survivor_monument, or you can just type into your browser Child Abuse Survivor Monument, it will come up, or Irving Studios, and it will come up. And it's a great website for all kinds of information on here for people, who are interested in stopping and preventing child abuse, and for people who, there's a huge fire right outside my apartment. But anyway, I think there's a huge fire right outside my building here. But hopefully it's not my building. I don't know. The alarms aren't going off. But anyway, this is not good. So I'm just going to, I don't know if I need to worry, but it's pretty serious, whatever it is. I think I better close. I'll be right back, okay? Yeah, sorry about that. The building next door to me is on fire, but that's okay. The fire department's out there putting it out, so hopefully it'll be all right. But anyway, so this website's just amazing for survivors of child abuse, as well as anyone who wants to educate themselves on the issues of child abuse. And what I wanted to look at tonight was how to respond to abuse in your community. It's a section, it's a page on the website, and it's some really good information here. I hope everybody will go and check this out, and www.irvingstudios.com. And they said child abuse is not confined to any one group or social class. It cuts across all ethnic, religious, social, and economic backgrounds. That's from Health Canada. It says everyone has a personal responsibility to protect our children, to uphold their rights. This will benefit all members of society. There is a need to recognize the general complicity of society in the patterns of abusive behavior that are inherited over generations and through cultural influences. And there is a need to promote the identification and naming of abusive behavior in the public domain. There is a fear of labeling. Society must recognize that people are more than their abusive issues. This is important for the abused and the abuser in us because it creates a space for healing. And there is a need for a community-driven response to prevent child abuse and to provide support and assistance for survivors of child abuse. Child abuse needs to be recognized as a social problem, not only a private problem. Communities need to take ownership of the issues of child abuse and take responsibility in responding. So I love what he has to say here. Like, honestly, this is really it. This is where it all comes down to as far as why abuse is still going on, why child abuse continues on today. And it is really because people don't want to take responsibility for it. The abusers don't want to take responsibility and get help. Society doesn't want to take responsibility and start funding these programs out here to stop child abuse. We could stop it. It's 100% preventable. Child abuse is a choice. Abuse is a choice. Abusers choose to do what they do. And, there are programs that do work that help parents to learn how to cope and how to not abuse their children. I've actually seen this on different websites out there. And if you do enough research, you can find it yourself. There's programs that have been proven to work, but they're not funded nationwide, and that's the problem. So nationally, they're just not funded. So they'll roll out these programs in one school district, in one city, in one state, right? And they'll find out 30 years later that this program was 100% successful. But it only affected 80 children because, thank God, those 80 children made it, had a great life and everything. But the thing, and they this was like first offense, child abuse, allegations, and parents who were actually turned in, and CPS or DHS, whoever had to step in. At that point, these programs would sort of work with the family to keep the family together, and the abuse stopped. It stopped completely. But that's because the program works. Problem being is it's not nationwide. It's only, these programs are only in certain areas and certain places, and they're not funded, right? So that's the problem. We really, the society and everyone needs to want to make a difference in this thing and want to help, because that's the only way it's going to change. Families have to, first of all, parents have to get the education and figure out within their own homes, that abuse can happen. And that's where most abuse takes place, is within the home. 90 to 95% of abuse happens in the home, and it's generally perpetrated by someone in the family, like a parent, caregiver, a relative, another sibling, a distant relative, cousins, grandparents and whatnot. These are the abusers, 90 to 95% of the time. And, so many times people in their own homes, they will not take responsibility and get the child some help. They just turn a blind eye. Well, that's what society does. Turn a blind eye. What we don't know about, we don't have to worry about. So, if I don't pay attention to these headlines and I pretend that child abuse doesn't exist, hey, I can go on and have a great life. In the meantime, these children are suffering at the hands of their parents and caregivers mainly, and sometimes child sexual predators and pedophiles and whatnot. But mainly it's a family member, and no one's doing anything about it. Just turning a blind eye, blaming the child. So many times parents will just let it slide because they're like, well, it's the child's fault, so they deserve what they get, or they'll just say, well, you have to, that's just the way it is in this house, you have to deal with it. So this is really sad, and it needs to stop. People need to start taking responsibility for this. Communities, it says, need to take ownership of the issues of child abuse and take responsibility in responding, and I so agree with this. It says the media can play more of a part in making the connection between violence and having roots in child abuse. That's the whole issue. Is like, it's all about education, right? And when you study the whole issue surrounding child abuse, and you actually study the whole issue surrounding family violence and whatnot, and you educate yourself about this sort of stuff, you can see that enough studies have been done over the years that they know all about it, But your average citizen doesn't want to pay too much attention to it. I know most people tuning into my shows are listening because they do care. But it's the other people that we're not reaching that, that don't care. So I know generally on my shows I'm speaking to people who do care, and, that's why they're listening to my shows. So that's the whole issue, because they're listening to other people's shows too and getting involved and probably more than likely. So that's the thing. It's these other sections of society that really don't care. They just don't care that these children out here tonight, will be abused, and some of them will lose their lives at the hands of their parents and caregivers, little babies, infants, toddlers, all the way up through their teen years. It's absolutely horrific what people are doing to their children. And we have to start making some noise and saying that this is wrong. It's incredibly wrong. I'm coming at you from a survivor. So, when you're listening to my shows, you're listening to a survivor talking. And so, I can't help but be quite passionate about it, because it bothers me that people don't care that children are abused, that they're being abused right now. They just don't care. And that makes me sick, because how can you call yourself a human being if you don't care? You know what I mean? Because that's a human trait and a human quality to care about children, to care about people. And to do something positive and proactive about it, not just sit around getting mad and angry. That just doesn't really do much. It's part of it, but the whole issue is it won't change it. Getting mad and angry doesn't change it, but getting proactive and getting the education and getting the awareness and making sure that the children in your own lives are not being abused. That's the biggest thing. And then get involved in your own community, in your own areas, your own communities, wherever you live, or get involved nationally, like I'm doing, with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. We're like a worldwide child abuse prevention not-for-profit organization. So anybody who wants access to our pamphlets, to our information, to our website can find it and can get that, right? So it doesn't matter what country you live in. If you want the information, we'll send it out to you. Pamphlets and different things, resources. It will try to help, if we can, to help people out, to find information. And we have lots of programs that we're going to be rolling out, but we need funding. That's the whole issue. So until we get the funding, there isn't much we can do. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. Let me tell you what, though. We are a primary prevention group, which is really the number one way to stop child abuse, because it stops the abuse before it happens. Secondary and tertiary prevention is good. It's needed. It's necessary. Thank God for those people. You know, the doctors, and therapists, and people who are looking after children who have been abused already. Thank God for them. But then I'd rather say we stop child abuse, so that no child has to go through that. The horrors of having your parents abuse you, or your caregivers, or some child sexual predator, and then having to pick up the pieces afterwards. Right? Unless you've been abused. And hey, there's people out there that have not been abused, really, and they still care. And I thank God for them every day. But, you know, there's a whole lot of us out there that know exactly what that's all about. And so, of course, we care, you know. I mean, I don't want to, I can't stand the thought of another child being mistreated in any way, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, sexually, you name it. It's so wrong. And so we have to do all we can to stop it, right? It says the public needs to make the connection between abused kids and people in jail, living on the street, dropping out of school, battling repeated illnesses, coping with addictions, and acting out violently and aggressively. Because that's the whole issue. That is what abuse does. That's I mean, it is just plain and simple. He's just spelling it out here very simply for people. You know, so many times I've heard really, you know, ignorant comments made by people over the years. You know, I've lived quite a long time now, so I've heard lots and lots of stupid comments from people that you would say, well, look at those kids. Why don't they just go home? Look at those kids on the street. They're just a bunch of thugs. They should just go home. And, you know, who cares if their parents have rules and they don't want to follow their parents' rules and stuff. Well, you know, maybe they just don't want to be raped by their dad, right? Or they might be trying to avoid being beaten up by their mother, right? They might be trying to avoid grandpa because he likes to molest them, right? You just don't know what's going on in the homes. And a lot of times people like to make judgments on people that they really don't have a clue what their home life is like. So I always put myself in those kids' shoes and I think, what kind of a home life do they have that would make them want to be on the street more than their homes? Because it probably feels safer for them to be on the street. That's why. And of course, then they've got to deal with all these addictions and anger management problems and aggression and violence and you know, just living these horrible lives, right? So we, you know, as a society, need to realize that a lot of these people that are on the streets are there because of these issues, and you know, involved in prostitution and you know, illegal activities and substance abuse and you name it. And a lot of it stems from child abuse. Actually, they've done studies with people who have been incarcerated for whatever kind of crime that they've committed, and there's so many people, you know, in jail that have done these studies that admitted to having been abused as children. And my brothers did time, you know, not all of them, but some of them. And they were abused as children, and they did prison time, and they did time in jail, and, you know, they were always in trouble. And, you know, people just thought they were losers, right, and they were drug addicts and whatnot. And society just liked to look down on our family, and even certain family members look down on them. And I'm sitting, and I know how they grew up, see. I was there, and I saw it, and I witnessed it, and I did not close my eyes. I did not pretend it wasn't happening and shove my head under the carpet. I was very much aware of what was going on in my home, and I knew the way they were being treated, you know, just basically the same way I was being treated. But the whole issue is that I saw it. I didn't pretend it wasn't happening and go off in my own little world. I was actually paying attention. And so, you know, I know what they went through. So I know why they ended up the way they did. And of course, as adults, we make choices. We make our own choices. But sometimes people can't make the right choices for themselves when they've been completely psychologically messed up. You know what I mean? And in every other way as well, right? So that's why it's so important for people to get the facts, get the education, you know, and think about these things. You know, we have to. If we're going to change it, we need to think about it. I always say we need a bunch of think tanks, you know, younger people, really, who have new ideas. You know, who want to step up to the plate and say, you know, this seems to be working. Let's try this. You know, this doesn't work, so let's not do that. Right? Take a look at what's not working within the system, and then don't do it. Right? And then look at what is working, and then build on it. That's really what we need to do. And it says needs assessments should look at community resources to help individuals stop child abuse and fill in gaps in services. It is important to have in each community accessible and coordinated resources and services for the treatment of individuals and families, and each community's response to abuse must be evaluated and adapted as change occurs. See, that's the whole issue. This stuff that's been done since 1950 isn't working anymore. It never worked in 1950. But at least they tried, and I'm very thankful for anybody who ever did anything to try to stop child abuse, let me tell you that. So I'm not running those people down. It's very smoky in here. That fire next door, that's why I had to get up and I had to go shut my door, because there was a huge fire next door, and flames were shooting off the building, and all this smoke came into my apartment. And so I had to go and close the door. And so it's really smoky in here, sorry. But I'm having a hard time breathing. But anyway, it's okay. But yeah, this is just the whole issue. It's absolutely horrible what's going on, and we have to make these changes. And I think it should be this generation. I really do. Why are we putting this off for another generation? And that many more children will be abused. Thousands upon thousands of children, and so much of it will not be reported, and that's a sad fact. And so much of it will be hidden and silenced, right? Because so many survivors don't want to talk about it, and then somewhere along in their 30s, they generally have a breakdown and have to see a psychiatrist or therapist, and they finally admit the abuse, right? And so many times, and this is just a fact, right? This is common knowledge. It's very, very sad. And forget how many actual survivors of child sexual abuse there are living in the United States, and I think it's somewhere around 60 million, some crazy amount like that. And that's sad and wrong. And, if we as a society don't stand up and say, hey, I'm speaking out against child abuse. I'm standing up for children's rights. I'm going to do all I can to protect children. Then we're just going along with it. We're just saying, it doesn't matter. It's no big deal. Of course, when there's a kid's cancer run on, everybody's all gung-ho, and they'll go out and buy the pink T-shirts and donate money and all this other stuff, right? Oh, yeah, let's cure cancer. Hey, I'm all for it, so don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? I'm all for, I think childhood diseases are horrible because I care about children, and so should everybody else. And I would have loved to have a child, and I lost my baby halfway through miscarriage, so I didn't get to have a child. But that's the whole issue. It doesn't matter. I still care about children very much, and I was a child, so I know I wouldn't have wanted to have a childhood disease like that. So that's the whole issue. I think about these children, and it breaks my heart. And of course, everybody's really willing to support that. No problem. We'll pump millions and trillions of dollars into that and wear the shirts, go out and say, hey, we've got to cure kids' cancer. But, when you have somebody to try to go out and say, let's stop child abuse, you know how many people just clam up, turn red in the face, and get all quiet and freak out, and, I could never do that. It's too embarrassing. It's like, yeah, that's right. And you think about how embarrassing it is to be a child who's been abused like that. Let me tell you that. Until they realize that the shame does not belong to them. It belongs to the abusers, right? The shame is not theirs. It's the abusers who should be ashamed of themselves. And, these children carry a lot of shame, and they carry a lot of guilt, and they carry a lot of negative feelings toward themselves, And so many people don't want to get involved because they're too embarrassed to say the words, stop child abuse, right? And for me, it's like, that's all I want to say. Because I care about these children out here, and I think, how many years do I have left on this planet? Well, then I better get busy because I want to see this stopped. And so, I would hope that everybody else would do the same thing, right? And it says we need further development of centralized referral sources such as the Advocacy Center in Guelph, and that's Ontario, and the National Advocacy Center in the USA. And it says an important part of prevention is creating public awareness through education, starting with our children. Additional government funding and educational support are needed to further develop prevention resources. So that's the whole issue. See, I love this website because he's talking exactly what's so necessary. I've been on all these different websites, and pretty much the information is the same. Primary prevention is the way to go, and that's what we're doing. And, of course, it makes people angry that we're talking about child abuse, and, because it ruins their day, right? They might have been having a really good day, and then all of a sudden they got to hear somebody talking about child abuse. And it's like, oh, man, here we go again. But you know what? We have to do it. Because if we don't, then we're going to be just like the abusers and just want it silenced. Because abusers want it silenced, see. They want to be able to continue to abuse children and do what they do, And they don't want a bunch of people standing up talking and speaking against child abuse because they like to abuse children, right? That's what they get off on. And they certainly don't want to do any jail time, right? Because their behavior is justified to them. They think it's perfectly fine to beat and kill their children, rape children, and sodomize them, whatever they do. Absolutely horrible. And see, I have to speak out against it because I think that is so wrong. And as a survivor, it is so wrong. You know what I mean? I cannot condone abuse of any kind, and I don't. And so then if I don't condone it, that means I got to stand up and speak out against it. I don't condone abuse of any kind towards a man, woman, child. I don't care what it is. I just don't condone abuse, right? So I have to speak out against it. And that's what everybody else should be doing too. And get involved where you can. You know, you see some community event in your area, and they're out, you know, doing a campaign to stop child abuse. Get involved. You know, whether it's going and being part of the event or helping to set it up or whatever. You know, get involved with your local shelters. There's tons and tons of shelters that quite often need assistance and need a hand in some way. You know, there's lots of ways to get involved. Children's hospitals. You know, just different things like that, right? I mean, if it comes to curing cancer for children, well, then everybody's rallying around the children's hospitals, right, to get involved with that. But what about those poor kids that are in there with all busted ribs and broken jaws and burnt feet, burnt to a crisp because their parents got out of control and decided to abuse them? It's a choice. Nobody's holding a gun to a parent's head saying, you have to abuse your child. You have to break their bones and burn their feet and rape them, right? No. That's their choice. They are doing that on their own accord because they want to. You know what I mean? And this is what really angers me because it's like this is preventable. It's not like cancer, you know, childhood cancers and whatnot. I mean, which some of that's probably preventable too. But the whole issue is a lot of it's genetics, right? Well, abuse is a choice. And these people are out here abusing their children and other people abusing other people's children, and it's a choice they're making to do it. And we're not going to stand up and protect those children, and we're not going to stand up and say, this is wrong, it needs to stop, we've got to get the education out there, we got to start getting these programs rolling out, we need the funding going where it needs to go to get these programs that are going to work rolling nationwide, and we need something done. Education in the school systems about abuse to let kids know there's help phone lines and make sure they phone them. And you know the services are overrun. There's nowhere for these abused kids to go. That's the problem. So I mean, we really have a lot of work to do, and whatever we can do, you know, to get it done is what we're going to have to do. And so that's the whole issue, right? As a society, we need to do this, right? So I'm not just talking about you. I'm saying me. We all do, right? And it says if you feel frustrated by the plight of abused children, you can make a difference. This is, for example, you could contact your member of parliament, lobby for changes to the criminal justice system, write letters to the editors of your local newspapers. Governments should be lobbied to develop policies which address the issues and concerns of child abuse. It says strategic members of the community need to be advocates to bridge gaps by lobbying governments to develop effective policies which address the issues and concerns of child abuse. There needs to be national and annual conferences on child abuse and neglect, and there are. You know, sometimes it's like an annual conference someplace about once a year, and about once a year you'll see a child abuse commercial to stop child abuse about once a year on television. Right? It's not enough. Right? It says, would you want to wait 6 months for heart surgery? Abused children often wait longer than that for treatment. Well, and some of them don't make it because they're just killed, right? So it says, speak out when you see child abuse happen. Name it. And when you are told to mind your own business, affirm that. Children are everyone's business, right? That's right. So we'll have to continue this on possibly Monday night. We have about a minute left. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. So sorry about the interruption in the show there. Yeah, have a great night, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back here on the weekend. You can see my show page as well as next week. We'll just start again. And take care of yourselves. And you know, get the signs and symptoms and know what's going on in your own home and make sure that your own children are not being abused. You know, and get the facts, get the information because it is happening and we have to stop it. So do whatever you can to protect your own children and to protect the children around you. Right? It's so important. You could save a child's life by doing that. We can save children's lives. So that's the importance of this, right? So have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.